All right, let's bring you this now. The EFF has hit back at the Western Cape Equality Court's ruling that found its leader, Julius Malema, guilty of hate speech. The party says the verdict is an attack on political expression following racial tensions between EFF members and parents of pupils at Brackenfell High School. Malema told the crowd that killing is a revolutionary act. Now, the court found that Malema's comments were in violation of the Equality Act and demonstrated a clear intention to incite harm and promote hatred. Now, the complaints were brought by the South African Human Rights Commission and an individual who reported feeling personally threatened. Let's speak now to the South African Human Rights Commissioner, Professor Tshepo Madlingozi, who joins us tonight. Professor, good evening to you. Thank you for your time. Take us back to when you decided to lodge a complaint against Mr. Malema. On what basis did you want him to be taken to task?
Good evening and good evening to you and your listeners. Thank you for having us. We received complaints from a number of individuals and institutions. We looked at the video, but also we looked at the transcript of the speech, and our assessment was that those words or those portions of the speech constituted hate speech. The basis for this, as you say, was the Equality Act, specifically Section 10 of the Act, that is very, very clear that, you know, none of us can propagate hatred, none of us can incite harm on the basis of prohibited grounds, whether it's race, gender, sexuality, religious harm. And we felt that as a commission, we should take Mr. Malema to task. We first addressed an allegation letter to Mr. Malema, asking Mr. Malema and the EFF to apologize, to retract the statements, and to undertake not to say the same statements in future.
Yeah.
They refused, therefore we approached the court.
So the EFF, in its arguments in court, they stated the following, that these were merely political statements or political commentary. In fact, if anything, this was metaphorical in nature. Do you take to heart what they are saying, that in the Equality Court's findings, they view this as a suppression of free speech, but also political commentary?
Well, let's start with the Constitution. The Constitution, as you well know, affords all of us the freedom of expression, but it limits it. It limits it on two important grounds. The first one is that none of us can propagate hate speech, and number two, incitement to violence is not allowed. That is taken further by the Equality Act, where in Section 10, it also makes it very clear that hate speech is not allowed. Of course, metaphorical speech, as we have seen, as the courts have also pronounced, is allowed. What is not allowed, and this was the case in this matter where a specific group of people are identified, a specific individual is also identified, members are exhorted to follow up, to isolate, and to deal with this person on the basis of their race and on the basis of their political belief. So we took the view that this was not metaphorical. This was a clear incitement to violence, and the court found in our favor that political speech is allowed. Metaphorical speech that is very harsh, that is even offensive, is allowed. But what is not allowed is to identify a group of people, exhort your members to follow up and to deal with them, and also to kill them. There are parts of the speech that can be argued that are metaphorical, you know, talking about whiteness and white supremacy. But in this case, very, very clear, the leader of the party says, you guys can identify the person in the video. Why did you not follow up with that person? So this is beyond the realms of metaphor.
Okay, we'll talk in a moment about the way forward, because for the EFF, they are clear. They're going to appeal this. In fact, they have made it abundantly clear that they're going to the Supreme Court of Appeal. But before we get there, yesterday we spoke to Anton Harbour. He's with the Campaign for Free Expression. He was commenting on this very case at the announcement of that judgment. And I'd like for us to listen to what he had to say before we continue the conversation.
Mr. Malema was found not guilty of hate speech when he sang "Kill the Boer." Then a few weeks ago, there was a finding that when he was called a cockroach, the person who did that, Kenny Kuneni, was guilty of hate speech. And now Mr. Malema is himself found guilty of hate speech for something that seems to me to be less serious than singing "Kill the Boer." So what strikes me is that we don't have a consistency. You know, there needs to be a very clear threat of hurt or harm as a result of a statement of this kind.
Professor Madlingozi, there is the comment. There needs to be a very clear threat of hurt or harm as a result of a statement of this kind. But add to that, what he says is the lack of consistency on the part of the Equality Court. Does that make your case slightly weaker, you think?
No, with all due respect, Professor Harbour has misdirected himself. I think, you know, what I've seen in the media and also in summaries, it's not a full context of the speech. What the court does is to contextualize the speech textually, politically, but also ideologically, as we had asked the court to do. Now, of course, in the Kill the Boer case, it was argued correctly, found by the court, that it is a metaphorical exhortation, it's a metaphorical expression. In this case, I don't think Professor Harbour looked at the entire speech, an hour and a half of the speech, where, as I said, number one, a specific individual is identified. Number two, members are exhorted to, quote unquote, follow up. Members of the party are told that, you know, you should have done what I did at the Winnie Mandela Memorial, where I dealt with this thing in a certain way. So we're not talking about metaphorical speech here. We are talking about a specific person identified. The person is identified on the basis of political belief and the basis of their race, and members are asked to commit an act of violence. What we should also highlight is that intention is not relevant here. What is relevant, as Section 10 of the Equality Act puts it, is whether a reasonable person will have a reasonable apprehension that this constitutes incitement. And in this case, we should be very clear that the two cases should be distinguished. And in this case, it was a specific reference to a specific person.
All right.
And members were asked, why didn't you not follow up? You should have done this. And I must also add as a footnote that in this case, the person received a number of threats and the person had to go into hiding.
Finally, Professor Madlingozi, the EFF is quite clear. They're going to the Supreme Court of Appeal to appeal the outcome at the Equality Court. Your thoughts on that, and are you willing to take this as far as that in order to make sure that the Equality Court judgment is upheld?
Yes, we welcome the announcement by the EFF that they will tackle this matter through the courts. Indeed, that's what all of us should do. When we are not happy with court judgment, we should vindicate our rights through the constitutional channels. And we look forward to meeting the EFF in court. All I can say is that, as I said, the court in this case was very, very careful to balance, on the one hand, the right to freedom of expression, the right to political speech, but that should be limited and that should not incite violence. As a Human Rights Commission, we are quite clear that we will always be consistent in addressing hate speech. We've done so with the Open Chat podcast. We've done so with Minister McKenzie, and we'll do so in this case where we'll meet the EFF in court.
Thank you very much for your time. South African Human Rights Commissioner, Professor Tshepo Madlingozi, talking to us there.